And I am now joined by a man who knows a thing or two about the psychology that goes behind quarterbacking in the NFL. President of the Moawad Consulting Group, Trevor Moawad. Trevor, 15 years experience working with these quarterbacks. And the list we'll see of the guys that currently play that you've worked with. But the draftees that are coming in this week to Philadelphia hoping to be drafted, some of those notables that we already talked about, a Patrick Mahomes, Deshaun Watson. What is it about this crop of quarterbacks that impresses you in terms of their mental toughness?
Well, I think the proactive nature, a lot of these guys, I've met these guys out in, many of them in Southern California, when on their own time they were traveling on spring breaks, time off over the holidays to come out and train with quarterback coach. This time it was Jordan Palmer. And their proactive nature, which is recognizing this is going to be a tough battle. And it's not going to be easy to, make it to a team, let alone perform well. So the proactive nature of guys aggressively looking at what it's going to take to succeed and surrounding themselves with experts who can help them, including people like me.
I'm sure for some of those guys, too, when they're 20, 21, 22, when you see that, it's probably very promising. Now, when you see some of the issues, some of the struggles some of these QBs have to deal with, how do you prepare them for some of those expectations that come with playing in the league?
Well, I think the biggest thing you need to understand is no matter where they're at, they don't need to be sick to get better. And so as you enter an organization, you have to understand from a level of competency, what's it going to require me to perform well within this team? So what are the requirements I need to do? And then give myself the best opportunity to do those things. We don't think about the human performance side of sports enough, and human performance meaning how we sleep, how we eat, what we think about. Are we aware of what we think about, the way we train, the way we stretch? I mean, all of those things that are around the strategy of the sport, you can actually get better at those things. And I think elite organizations are adding not just one person like Trevor Moawad, but layers of them. I think that's what made Nick Saban, Jimbo Fisher at these top college programs, where you're addressing proactively the psychological space, the nutritional space, all those things. And those are things that'll make a difference and help you succeed at this level at a young age, because if you're good enough, you're old enough.
And now, we've heard a little bit of insight from a Tom Brady, who has started to invest and vocalize into how some of those things have helped him improve and certainly help with the longevity of his career. In your opinion, though, as you continue to work with guys and programs and coaches, is sports psychology growing? Is it more of a buy-in now from some of those guys?
I would like to say yes, and I think for people who've been in it 15, 16 years like myself, I think that there is an avenue when you have coaches who understand the unique value proposition proactively training the mind can do. I would have to say, if you look at the trend, it would not be growing. And I would say that most coaches don't even know what they're not doing. So if you take a look at the NFL right now, I'm aware of 3 or 4 organizations that are employing a performance-based sports psychology consultant. So you're looking at still about 85% that have something connected to the employee assistance programs and anger management and things of that nature, but integrated, embedded like a strength coach, nutritionist. I don't see that growing as of yet.
You still have some room to grow. Now, unfortunately, a growing trend for some of these NFL players is making a mistake in their life that is going to impact perhaps the way they perform, or coming back from a significant injury. How do you get a guy there to a point where they are comfortable with themselves on the field?
You know, I think the unique things about sports, Jamie, is you feel like you have a choice, but choice is really an illusion. If you're going to be great, there's not a lot of ways that you can be great. And so when you form a habit, that habit forms you. And that's with respect to Fred Taylor was an athlete I worked with for many years at Jacksonville, myself and Chad Bowling, who works with the Cowboys and the Yankees. And Fred wanted to play 16 games in a season. And he had the nickname Fragile Fred. But he was an unbelievably kinetic athlete. There was nothing he couldn't do. But when he wanted to do that, one of the first things we did was tried to understand what guys were doing that had played 2 or 3 contracts on the Jacksonville team. And there were really 2 common denominators of all those athletes. One, they all showed up at 6:30 in the morning or earlier. Meetings started at 8:25. And at the end of the day, they all did ice baths. So our first challenge to Fred was, let's show up before 6:30 and let's do ice baths. And he's like, well, what am I supposed to do before 6:30? And I have no idea.
You just got to be
but
there.
Whatever these guys are doing,
Yeah.
they're figuring it out. And ultimately, Fred went on to play 46 games in a row. I think he's got qualifications to be a Hall of Famer, but it started with things that simple. And I think that if you do the simple things well, that's where you win. I mean, you hear these psychological terms like growth mindset and all these different terms. It's not challenging.
Mm-hmm.
We have an ad campaign. We have a way psychologically we advertise to ourselves. And ultimately, our influence over ourselves, particularly with our decisions we're making when we're in the building and when we're out the building, that's the game changer.
So you give them the equation, they just have to fulfill it, and hopefully that's the solution to some of their problems. Speaking of that equation that you hopefully give a guy, we hear Cooper Kupp is one of one of the names that we should be asking you about.
Yes, I have known Cooper since he was 0. I was literally at the hospital when he was born.
Oh.
His mother was my next door neighbor growing up, and she was a 3-time All-American soccer player and ultimately played for Colleen Hacker, who helped coach the World Cup team in '99. And father was a great quarterback and grandfather. I've known him forever. He is somebody who will exceed expectations since we were playing basketball out on the street when he was 7, 8 years old. But a great family, but somebody, in seeing him just a few weeks ago in Irvine, down with his agent Ryan Tollner, really trying to understand what it's going to take for him to succeed, make this transition from Eastern Washington to the NFL. He's already aware of those things and fast-tracking himself to make sure he's going to enter at a higher level. Again, like I told you, if you're good enough, you're old enough. You don't need to wait 3 years, and let's be honest, this league isn't giving anybody 3 years.
And maybe he gets a little neighborhood discount when he gets to work
Yes,
with you. Thank you so much for joining us, Trevor.